boa tarde a todos. Muito obrigada pela presença. O Piano e Suas Perspectivas é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas, Reitoria Digital e Pro-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura da Universidade Federal de Goiás, Mississippi State University e Universidade del Atlántico, na Colômbia. Com o apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Fazem parte da equipe do programa Além de Mim, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Seba e Amira Nunes. E nossa proposta é levar a todos os interessados assuntos relacionados à importância da arte e seu papel na sociedade. Todas as sextas-feiras, um convidado muito especial. A entrevistadora de hoje será a doutora Rosângela Seba, chefe do Departamento de Piano da Escola de Música da Mississippi State University. The Piano and its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department and Provost of Culture of the Federal University of Goiás, Universidade del Atlántico, Colombia, and Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária, and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Seba, and Amira Nunes are part of the program's team. Our proposal is to bring to all those interested issues related to the importance of music and its role in society. The interview today will be Dr. Rosângela Seba, Head of the Piano Department, Mississippi State University. Welcome, Dr. Seba and Dr. Ilka Araújo.
Thank you for having us, Andrea. Welcome, Ilka.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you, Andrea and Rosângela.
It's been a pleasure getting to know Ilka. Unfortunately, we never met in Brazil, although we are from the same country, but we met in the United States, which was a fortunate situation. We were both presenting at a conference. So talking about Dr. Araújo, she has a bachelor's degree in music from State University of Ceará in Brazil. She has a master's in music and PhD from University of Florida. Dr. Araújo has received several awards in Brazil, and she's currently a professor at Texas Wesleyan University, very active K-Post 12 and private piano studio, and she's now serving as the chair of the music department at Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome, Dr. Araújo. It's been a pleasure. So we always ask about, how do you start music? Because I think the starting is one of the best points of getting somebody interested in music or not. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience as a young musician or a young pianist?
Yes. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Seba, for having me here. It is a great opportunity to not just talk about piano, but to share this incredible journey, which is the life of a musician with our spectators. I grew up in Fortaleza, which is a city in the northeast of Brazil. And my father was a guitar professor of the Conservatory of Music, Alberto Nepomuceno. And from the age of 7 years old, I joined the conservatory as a guitar student and taking general music studies, music theory, choir, orff instruments. And 2 years after that, even though guitar was my first instrument because of my father's influence, 2 years after that, I completely fell in love with the piano. And it was just something that I thought it was so powerful. And so I transitioned to piano, and I finished the entire study in the conservatory before going to the university in Fortaleza. I had two main teachers at the conservatory. One was Margarida Selma Leite, who I meet all the time when I go to Brazil. Even these days, we have become great friends. And not only was she my teacher during my conservatory years, but she was also my teacher during my bachelor studies in Fortaleza. And then for a period of 2 years, I had another teacher called Imelda Ferreira. And she only taught me for 2 years, but she was so important in that very small range of time, because she taught me to believe in myself. And she would sometimes listen to me playing some improvisation in the practice room that I thought was forbidden in the conservatory. And she would say, "Hey, why don't you play your Beethoven like you play those pieces, you know?" And I would look at her and I would be so scared. And is it allowed? And she said, "Yes, of course." So she basically freed myself. And so I'm very thankful to her, even though I only studied 2 years with her. But I'm very thankful because that was a very important step in my development. And my other professor, Margarida Selma, she gave me all the foundation, everything that I needed to completely fall in love with music and want to pursue that as a career. I remember that when I was a high school student, I would look at her and I would want to be like her. And she was teaching both piano and music analysis, theory analysis at the university level. And I kind of wanted to be like her. And when I was doing my bachelor's degree in Fortaleza, I started becoming aware that the world was bigger than just the northeast of Brazil. So I started traveling everywhere. And I started participating in international festivals, both in Brasilia, the Civebra, that was very popular for a very long time, and then going to Rio to have lessons with Luis Carlos de Moura Castro and Homero Magalhães, who was still alive at the time. And those two people became very important in my development of music. They really taught me what the world really was and the level of piano playing and music making. And I can say that they were basically very responsible for even the bridge between Brazil and the United States later on when I came to study. And I got so involved with everything that I ended up traveling almost every 2-3 months to Rio to have those lessons with them. Whenever Luis Moura Castro was in Brazil, I would go wherever he was just to have a private lesson. And at one point, even Homero Magalhães allowed me to stay in one of the apartments that he had empty at Ipanema. And that helped me also because it was very expensive to travel and to pay for the lesson, so I didn't have to pay for hotel. So I'm very thankful for these people that came throughout my journey. In one of the Liszt festivals in Rio, I ended up participating as a translator and as a pianist, and I translated the masterclass of one of the pianists called Boaz Sharon. I translated the whole masterclass for him throughout the week. And on the last day, I played for him. So after I played, he asked me what my intentions were. And I told him that I was finishing my bachelor's. I wanted to do a master's degree. I was trying to find some scholarship to go to Germany, but it was becoming a little bit difficult to have the scholarship. He looked at me and he said, "Well, if you come to study with me at the University of Florida, I give you an assistantship." So my plan to come to the United States was never really in my mind. At the time, I thought I had to go to Germany to study music further. So it was a pure accident, but a very happy accident because I ended up going there. I had full support from him, really liked my time at the University of Florida, and learned everything that I needed to learn for my career, both in the performance part and in the music pedagogy, especially piano pedagogy. And later on, being at the University of Florida, I also fell in love with music history. And that led to my doctoral studies in both performance and musicology.
Andrea is in the queue here for one of your performances. Can you explain exactly what performance this is that she cued in?
Okay, this was a faculty recital in 2021. And one of the very first ones that we did, still in the middle of the pandemic. So with a limited number of people in the audience and live streamed, because that's how we were performing the recitals. So that was my faculty recital in the fall of 2021.
Okay, Andrea, if you would please cue on the first piece, which is already, I think, in the queue there. And can you explain what that is?
Okay, this is it's a piece by Villa-Lobos. Once I left Brazil, I felt a great responsibility to promote our Brazilian music. If you live in Brazil, it is already part of the curriculum in many conservatories and in many universities that you always include Brazilian music. So that was something that we did normally, or at least where I was doing my bachelor's degree. Once I left, I had the opportunity to play a recital in Germany in 2003. And in that program, I listed 2 pieces by Villa-Lobos, and those were the Impressões Seresteiras and the Dança do Índio Branco. And when I played that music, the people from the audience came to me at the end and they told me they never heard the name Villa-Lobos. The only one person that knew the name Villa-Lobos was a guitar player that was in the audience. So after that recital, I felt a big, actually that season, I felt an important mission to always present some Brazilian music in whatever performance I have. So what we're going to have here in this video is a performance of Carnaval das Crianças, or Children's Carnival, by Villa-Lobos, which is a piece that is built with some Brazilian kind of children's songs in mind, not necessarily a direct quote, but Villa-Lobos was already composing some music with some indirect ideas of nationalism. And at the same time, he also incorporates techniques from French composers using pentatonic scales, using whole tone scales, and octatonic scale even sometimes, and also ideas of ballets like Petrushka, or some of these this music from either Debussy or Stravinsky. So it's a very unique side of Villa-Lobos' image, not just as a nationalistic composer, but also as an international composer.
Okay, here it is, Carnaval das Crianças.
I think the sound is mute.
Mute, yeah. Andrea, you need to click on mute. We could hear you more, but we have to continue. So, is this the piece that he later reorchestrated or orchestrated and became the Momo Percossi? Am I correct with
Yes.
that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly.
So it's Momo Percossi is, I think it's one of the largest works for that Villa-Lobos has written, isn't it? Besides the Uirapuru and the symphonies that the Bachianas for
Yes.
symphony. Yeah. Well, Ilka, we also met in the Villa-Lobos International Conference, right? Where you were presenting. Were you performing or were you presenting at that conference?
I went 2 times to that conference. The first one I was just performing, and the second one I did a lecture recital. So in my first one, I just performed. It was a 20-minute recital, for the performers. So I performed an entire program, of course, of Villa-Lobos, in which I had the movements from the Ciclo Brasileiro. I also had A Lenda do Caboclo. I also had some movements from Prole do Bebê, whatever I could fit, in that 20-minute range. And on the second festival, which was in 2019, I believe the first one was 2011, and then or 2008, something like that, yeah. And then 2019, and they were both at VCU in Virginia. I did a lecture recital talking about Villa-Lobos as a nationalistic composer, but also at the same time as an international composer, because his use of the color of the instruments, not just for the piano, but even when he, for instance, orchestrates the Carnaval das Crianças in the orchestra, he is using this coloristic use of the orchestra that French composers were using, or even some late 19th century Russian composers, the Russian Five, with very colorful use of woodwinds and, sometimes percussion instruments, the new percussion instruments of the 20th century. So it puts Villa-Lobos in a very special position in the world. Not only is he a modern composer in Brazil, trying to bring these ideas of modernism, in the beginning of the 1920s in Brazil, but he's also at the same time updated with the techniques that are happening in Europe at the time, in France especially, and just being as important as those other composers that from the group of the 6 composers in France, as well as Debussy and Ravel, that happened to become the most important composers in that early part of the 20th century in France. So it puts Villa-Lobos really like up to par with them.
One of the things that I like about talking with Ilka is that she brings the musicology part in the performance and also in the explanations. And that's the idea of not only being a pianist, but knowing the context of the music, as well as the context of the world within the music, or the music within the world that has been established in composers. So I know that you do a lot of different things, including a big leadership, not only at your university, but at MTNA. And we met in MTNA as well. It feels like we always meet in a conference. Tell us a little bit about your involvement and importance as a musician to be involved in those associations, in your role. I know that for a while you were the president of the Fort Worth, right? Music Teachers Association, which is a huge association since it's a big city. Can you explain why you did that first, the importance of that in your career and for others, because it's a service, it's a large service, but it's a service, and also the importance of being involved in a music association as a musician?
Yes. First of all, the music history part was something that called my attention when I was a master's student at the University of Florida, when my music history professor, Dr. David Kushner, invited me to ask if I were interested in studying musicology for my PhD. Honestly, I didn't even know the meaning of musicology. I didn't know what that meant, but I did like my music history classes and I liked writing my papers. And then when I discovered that musicology was the science that studied music history and all that, I became fascinated. And during my PhD studies, it only made sense that everything has to be justified through sound. So when I teach my music history classes, we always have to have the literature to back it up. We always have to have examples. So if I tell my students, I was just talking about Debussy's use of, let's say, octatonic scale or whole tone scale or pentatonic scale, then I have to play a musical example right there for them to be able to identify and for them to be able to connect that sonority with early 20th century French music. So that completely gives them a whole perspective of the history and why that composer had that sound at that time in that specific country. So everything has a reason, through historical events, through social events, through economical events. That's why every one of the composers that we study have their specific sonorities. And I think that helps us as performers, as music directors, conductors, and even composers to understand that perspective of music. When I moved to Fort Worth here in Texas in 2007, I didn't have a job yet, and I was just teaching private piano. And the first people that I met were people connected with the Fort Worth Music Teachers Association. So in the first month, I was already invited to go to the opening meeting, which was in August 2007, in the house of one of the members. And when I went to that meeting, then I just completely loved the group of people that everybody was working for the same means, which was to teach music, to give opportunities to the students, and to share activities for the teachers throughout the year. So I completely became involved with them immediately. And the next year, they had the need for a treasurer. And I signed up to become a treasurer of that group. And I became a treasurer for many years for them. So I was always involved on the board and getting to the point that I became president later on in 2013 through 2015. And I always found that was very important. And we do have, of course, different layers. We have the local associations, then we have the state associations, we have the national association. And I just feel that, and I'm still involved in the local association as a board member, as a director now, because I feel that that's so important. We need to prepare our students from the beginning. So if we cultivate excellence in the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and if we teach our teachers, in the association, if we give them opportunities to grow, opportunities to discover the latest ideas on technique or on sight reading skills or memorization, then we all grow together. And we have, of course, many different types of students. We have students that want to be international competition winners. We have other students that just want to play piano for fun. And if we are able to still give them the basics so they could one day be independent, I think our mission is completed. And my philosophy is always to say, if we can give them basic technique and basic sight reading skills, these students will become independent. So they can finish studying with us. Let's say when they finish high school, they can go on to their careers. They can open a book at home late at night and they can read. They can read Christmas music. They can read movie track music. They can read some, let's say, mazurkas by Chopin. They can read some nocturnes. They can read some music at whatever level they can read, a Bach prelude, or things like that. So if we give them the basic that they need for sight reading and for technique, their fingers work, their eyes work, then that's it. They can be musicians at whatever level they want to serve. They don't have to necessarily be professional musicians, but music will always be there with them. Music is this companion that really never abandons you. And you can always go back to music at any point in your life, whether it's for just self-pleasure or for a mission like educating an audience or sharing music, resurrecting some music that would be dead on a piece of paper. And if you don't play, that music will never be heard. So all of us will find a niche somehow, or to entertain family, or to entertain people in the neighborhood, or to play for a hospital or for a memory care service, just doing those kind of community service. So there is always a place for music. And if our students can do that, then we have a whole society.
And how did you become the chair of your department right now?
Yes, that's a very good question. It was purely accidental. It was never my goal to, even though I've been managing and heading the piano studies at Texas Wesleyan for a number of years now. But in 2021, in the beginning of 2021, it was just enough of a pandemic for most of my colleagues, especially the senior colleagues. And in most of our department, the full-time people were with my senior colleagues and myself. I was the youngest one in the group, and they just decided that, okay, this is the time for us to retire. And they were, of course, great contributors of the development of music in Fort Worth, and not just in the areas that they were, but both in vocal, instrumental, choral music, and so they had their fair share. And I was the one that was tenured at the time and could take that position. So my dean called me and we spoke on the phone, and I decided to take that on. It was a little bit difficult. The first 2 months I was in denial, never announced to anybody. Still have not announced it. It's been 2 years now. But after 2 months, after the whole summer, I came to peace with myself. And again, just like the same philosophy that I have, that we all have to discover our niche and where we need to serve, what we are here for, I made peace with myself that, okay, maybe if that is something that I am supposed to do, because I have a mission to fulfill in this area, I will do it happily. And then from that time on, even with the adversities too of the pandemic and, all the situations that our students were going through with, online classes or hybrid classes, that took a while for things to really get a little bit more settled. I have to say that now in the fall of 23 is almost like, okay, the sun came up again. Life is beautiful, and it's almost like we never had a pandemic. So things are finally prospering, and we can collect now, all the flowers and, the fruits and everything that we have planted for these past 2 years that were a little challenging.
Yeah, I think one of the objectives of this program is to show the perspective that of a musician, not only as a performer, because everybody thinks that we sit down and play. That's about basically it. There is no practice time anymore. We don't need to practice. We don't need to study. We don't need to reinvent ourselves. At the same time, also, we don't serve the community. The community serves us, which is completely the opposite. And I see you as a person that embrace that side of musicianship, which is to serve the community that you are in. I also know that you fundraised to buy a new piano, a new Steinway for your department, which is not an easy thing. Pretty soon, my department is going to have a wonderful announcement, and I'm looking forward to that. We not only reached the amount of pianos that we wanted, but we reached more. But that's a different subject. But I know how hard it is to buy one piano or many pianos, and you were able to do that. Can you explain all the process that you had to go through? And I played in that piano, and it's gorgeous. You really did a fabulous job. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, thank you so much, and congratulations on your all your pianos and your upcoming news. So
you know what it is, isn't it?
Yes, it is a difficult journey. And you mentioned about, okay, people think we just sit down and we are blessed and we are very talented and we just play. Everything is through a lot of work. A part of my philosophy is that, I always put myself in similar situations as my students. So for instance, if they have a recital coming up, I plan a recital for myself. So we're both working together. So it becomes like this parallel sort of universe. So I know what they're going through and they know it's possible because I'm going through. I'm just not demanding something from them out of an idea, right? It is a real thing. And when I tell them, hey, I have no weekends this weekend, I have to practice like 4-6 hours a day, and you're going to do the same, then it's easier for them to probably believe, that's something possible. So we had, at one point at Texas Wesleyan, we needed a new piano for our stage. so that our students could benefit, so our students could have the response of all the efforts that we're talking to them about. Hey, you know, the pedaling, you look at the sound and how you make this articulation, the clarity. So if the instrument is not able to give back what you need to do, then your work is just done halfway. So we needed our students to experiment that, and not just for the piano majors, but even the students that needed piano accompaniment, or the orchestra, or the all the ensembles, the choirs. They needed something that would respond to the level that they needed that response. We had the traditional Van Cliburn International Competition that happens here every 4 years in Fort Worth. And now they have 3 different editions of that competition. And I'm proud to say that not only do we have the international professional competition, but we also have an amateur competition, level competition. You have to be 35 years old and above and not make money through a piano to compete in that category, and also another junior category up to 18 years old, because we do have a lot of extremely talented kids out there. So there are 3 different versions now of the famous Van Cliburn competition. So on the competition of 2017, we always have 30 finalists that go play, and they all have to play the preliminary program. And I went to every single concert because I got very lucky to get some tickets sponsored by a generous donation from somebody from Dallas. And I took my students with me because I had those tickets. So because my students were there with me, we went to every single one of those preliminary concerts because I wanted them to experience the difference between one pianist and the other. Even though there are 30 fabulous top pianists in the world, but there is still difference between them, and the level will still be different. So I wanted my students to experience that. And after 3 days of listening to 25 different pianists, because 25 of them chose this specific piano, and the sound of the piano was just gorgeous, I approached the Steinway people that had, a table over there, and I told them I was interested in the piano. And they thought I was, joking, and I was a little bit, crazy. They said, this piano belongs to New York. It's going back to the concert fleet in New York. It's not to stay in Fort Worth. And with that, I was able to talk with my chair at the time, and the chair talked with the president of the university. We had a meeting, and by the end of that week, we were able to formulate a plan. My president at the university said, if you find the first 3 donors, I will sign the contract, which at the time, the university didn't have the money for the piano. And I am very thankful to this day to 3 ladies from the SAI, Sigma Alpha Iota organization, Alumni Association at Texas Wesleyan, who actually were my first donors. And 2 of them passed away this past 3 years, which very sadly, and we still have one alive. And every time I always think of them, and I'm always very thankful. And then after they came through. So Barbara Bolaire was one of the donors, and she passed away in 2020. And then Patricia Woolley, she was another donor, and she passed away a year ago. And then we have Mary Pastusek, who is still alive and very active in the SAI and very big supporter of our program at Texas Wesleyan. So I'm eternally grateful to them. And then after that, we did several concerts and several visits with possible donors so we could collect the rest of the money. And one of the concerts that we did was to have one of the Cliburn winners of the competitions to come and perform a recital at Texas Wesleyan, in which would draw everybody from the North Texas area and make that that visible that we were acquiring the piano. The piano was going to stay home in Fort Worth, and they became donors too. And the pianist was Vadim Kolodenko, who won the first prize in 2013. And by coincidence, he had chosen that piano for the first Olga Kern competition in 2015. So there was this connection with these 2 great prize winners, and Olga Kern won the first prize in 2001 So we had both of them in that combination, and it was just very successful for us. And until today, everybody wants to come and everybody wants to play on that piano. Even kids, sometimes from, high school or middle school, they want to come and play in this amazing, gorgeous piano. So it's a great thing.
It is a fine piano. And again, not every place has such instrument to offer for not only students, but for guest artists. So it's a beautiful piano. Ilka, I also know that you keep in touch with one of the composers from Brazil, from your hometown. His name is Liduino Pitombeira, right? And you have also been a proponent of his music. You've been the pianist that has made his music live, come to life. So we have another link. Can you explain to us what this music is about?
Yes, Liduino Pitombeira is one of the greatest composers, contemporary composers that we have now in Brazil. And by coincidence, he is from my same hometown in Fortaleza, Ceará. And he, in 2020, and that was the year of the pandemic, we were going to have a festival completely dedicated to his music in Campinas. And that festival got canceled because of the pandemic. And then finally, that festival took place in 2022, in the spring, in March 2022, in Campinas. It's called International Brazilian Contemporary Music Festival. And that the festival was dedicated to him, to his music. And I have known Pitombeira for a long time. We actually took undergrad theory classes together, and he was so much more advanced than the rest of us. And it's been a very strong connection throughout all these years. In 2011, I presented a paper at the National CMS on a piece that he wrote for clarinet and piano called The Magic Squares. And I just became fascinated about his style, his technique, the way that he composes music. So for this festival dedicated to his music in Brazil, I decided to do a research on two different genres that he basically created for many different instruments. And they're called serestas, and they're called Brazilian landscapes. Two different genres, just like Villa-Lobos had the baquianas, and he composed the baquianas for different instrumentation. Each number is, or the choros, each one of the numbers is for, a different instrumentation. Pitombeira did the same thing with these two genres that he created. One called Brazilian landscapes, and the other one called serestas. And up until now, he already has 22 of each one of those, and each one of them for different instruments. So after I did the presentation on those two genres in Brazil in March 2022, it had already been in my mind since 2020, when that festival was going to be dedicated to him, to bring him to the United States and do a festival at Texas Wesleyan, having my colleagues and having our students perform his music for the many different media. Because of the pandemic, we postponed it. So in November of 2022, we were able to have both him and his wife, Duda Cavalcante, Maria José de Cavalcante, who is also a very well-accomplished pianist, to come and participate in this festival. And the piece that you have there on the video is a concerto that he composed for piano and a string orchestra in 3 movements. And the way he composes his music, even though he is a modern composer, but he also has a hint of nationalism in his music. So sometimes he will label some of his movements, some regions in the northeast of Brazil, or he will label them dances that are nationalistic Brazilian dances. So even though the music may sound dissonant, but sometimes there is some kind of correlation with some nationalistic aspect of our Brazilian music. And the rhythmic cells too, and sometimes even the use of some exotic instrumentation will also resemble some of our most traditional dances that we can find, especially in the northeast of Brazil.
And are we listening to the first movement? Or?
Yes, so we're listening to the first movement.
Okay.
And this is the concerto for piano and string orchestra.
So can I ask you that there was no cadenza? Am I correct?
Correct. Yes. You know what he does? He puts the cadenza on the second movement.
Okay.
And if you in this recording, unfortunately, it was during pandemic time, and there was a live streaming situation, so the sound is not sometimes perfect, so you can kind of hear some in and out sometimes. So it gives us a little difficult perspective because it comes from a live streaming recording. But what he does is he is using sonorities from Bartók. He used Bartók's Z cell, for instance. And so in a way, it is a composer from the northeast of Brazil, sometimes using a term, a city that he names the movement on, but then the sounds come from modern techniques of Bartók, who was in a way a nationalistic composer too in Hungary. So what Liduino does is he changes sometimes a little bit the form, right? Even though it's a concerto, it's in 3 movements and all that, but he will, instead of the traditional cadenza in the first movement, he will put a cadenza on the second movement. And just completely surprising in that sense. So that is his part of his contribution. So trying to, of course, bring something different, right, to the development of music and trying to create different ideas moving forward.
Yeah, that dialogue between the piano and the percussion reminded me of the sonata for percussion and piano, for two pianos. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So here we are with Ilka Araújo, and she's bringing a different perspective of being a musician, a pianist, head of the department, not only pianist, but proponent of Brazilian music, contemporary Brazilian music. What is your actual right now research? What are you doing, and what are you preparing right now?
The past years, I was really dedicated to composers and new composition. When I was at the University of Florida, I spent a great deal playing new music and being engaged with, with living composers. And that was something that still stayed with me for a long time. I wrote my dissertation on the music of Marlos Nobre, who is another great Brazilian composer. And then being dedicated to other Brazilian composers, not necessarily living Brazilian composers, just prompted me to continue researching their music. And then, of course, the music of Pitombeira came as well. But for the past 10 years, I have to say, my focus has really shifted to piano pedagogy. Because, and even though I go back and forth, right, as you know, I wear many hats. But what I also realized is that in this, and I say this to my students all the time, we all have a plan. We go to the university, we want to graduate with a certain degree, and we have a plan of what we want to do. But then life is a little bit different. Then you get a job, and sometimes your job tells you what you're going to do and not what you would like to do at the job. And that has definitely happened with me. So my job at Texas Wesleyan has graciously given me opportunity to keep both areas of musicology and piano going together. This would not happen in a much bigger university. I would have to definitely specialize myself. So I took that with a great sense of happiness that I could still do both and be active in both areas. And every year I fluctuate. It depends on what needs my immediate attention. So when I needed to write some articles, when I needed to focus on some writing, then I dedicated some years to doing research on music history, on living composers, premiering their music, and so forth. From 2013, I had this urge to completely reform our piano department. And of course, because of my job at the time, I was the president of the Fort Worth Teachers Association, and I was judging piano everywhere, just like you do. So we judge all different levels of competitions, and I started observing what was lacking in sometimes, the students that I was judging. Why couldn't they achieve the highest grades? What was missing in their playing? And again, back to those two basic things, the sight reading and the technique, right? So, or the reading ability, not necessarily sight reading, but reading ability, because sometimes you can get a student that already knows how to play their music, and then you put the music in front of them and you say, hey, can you play from this part? And it's almost like they never played the music before, right? So it's a reading ability. So it's not even necessarily sight reading. So reading ability to be able to identify what you're already doing and be able to, play your music sometimes from whatever spot you're asked for. So I felt that I needed to train my students to be able to do that as teachers in the society. And I'm not saying that the teachers are not doing it, but it's just that sometimes they are not aware because nobody told them. Nobody told them, just like we became aware that we have to have the right posture, we have to have the right distance of the bench to the piano. If nobody tells you about it, you will not know. And sometimes you get students through the door at the college level that they're playing their repertoire, but nobody ever called their attention that, hey, you're lifting your leg too much on the pedaling. You don't need to lift your full leg, even though they're playing advanced repertoire, right? But it became a habit for them. Or a position in the hand, a certain way that they do things, they stretch their fingers too much as opposed to, just moving the forearm or placing their hand. So they have these bad habits that if we don't tell them and if we don't teach them that it could be accomplished in a different way, they will continue playing even more and more difficult music, and those habits will stay there, and they will never be able to teach students from the beginning and give them the correct habits. So I felt that I needed to do this as in my piano department. So I created a piano pedagogy program for the undergrad, basically almost at the same level of a master's degree in pedagogy, because I felt that it was going to be so much more useful for my students, because none of them will really make money playing piano out there. That's one of the illusions that we have in a performance degree, right? So if they learn how to teach piano, then that will give them a perspective. And another thing that I added too was to give chamber and accompany classes that one of my colleagues teach, because everybody needs a collaborative pianist. Everybody needs a pianist to accompany. And if they're not taught how to accompany, and even if when they are great readers, then, it cannot serve them, right? So if they have this baggage in the undergraduate level, then they can be very successful with the degree that they have and not come to the university, oh, I really would like to be a musician, but I know I'm not going to make money, so I'm going to do business and have lessons on the side. So they can still be very successful with a music degree and break all the stigmas from family and even from themselves that, a music degree will not give you a perspective of a solid job. So when they learn that, and we cover the literature, we cover piano literature, we cover technique, we cover all the basic methods that exist out there. Sometimes they're surprised. They don't know that, all these methods that we know, Faber and Faber, that, you go one step by step, from Helen Marley, or you go from Alfred, that will teach, hey, you don't know how to teach piano, get this book, just follow one page after the other. After you teach 4 students, you know how to teach piano very well, so just for them to know that all this material is available. You don't have to know everything on the very first lesson you're going to teach. So it has been completely revolutionary. And then to add to my research, it's been more on technique. So many more, even though there is an awareness today of carpal tunnel syndrome, of tendinitis, things that we never talked about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But there is still a lot of misconcept. And so this is what I try to, for instance, there is a misconcept that sometimes you cannot play too loud. Yes, sometimes you need to play too loud, but you cannot play too loud for 4 hours every day, So of course that will damage you. But if your piece demands fortissimo, yes, you have to play fortissimo, and you have to practice to get to that fortissimo, so you know how to play that fortissimo. So you have to invest some time, or you should not play too fast, because that can be a little bit, dangerous for the hand. Yes, of course, sometimes we have to play too fast, but we have to build up, and we have to understand our anatomy, and we have to build up a plan, so that by the 8th week you are at that speed, but gradually, and not something that, hey, in 2 days you have to reach out this speed, right? So creating a little bit more of knowledge, and also clarifying some of the misunderstandings of all the different techniques that came in the beginning of the 20th century, when they started this awareness that many different schools, the Mate school, the Talman School, Alexander Technique School, and these are all grateful. But we need to actually use all of them together, not just separate them and reject one and accept another one as better. They're all very good, and they're all complementary. So if we actually add a little bit of all of them and we make our own formula, then they will serve us and serve our students in whatever goals they have of development that they want to achieve and repertoire that they want to play.
Well, you basically covered my next question, which was the advice that you would give to a young musician. And it's always been a pleasure talking to you, Ilka. I can say that every time I go to a conference, I hope to see you so we can share our experience and talk about things. And Ilka has my great respect as a musician, as an administrator, and a musicologist as well. So I'm very thankful that you accept the invitation today to be part of this interview. Thank you very much. And thank you, Andrea, for allowing me to invite Ilka. And I wish you, your university, and all your friends and family great success and prosperity always. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. And thank you very much to both of you, Rosangela and Andrea. It's been a pleasure. And of course, we always have so many ideas that we can learn from one another. And it is my goal to always encounter you in the conferences as well. Yes. Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilka. Amazing interview. Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
O Piano e Suas Perspectivas é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas, Reitoria Digital e Pro-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura da Universidade Federal de Goiás, Mississippi State University e Universidade del Atlántico, com apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal. Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Muito obrigada a todos vocês que estiveram conosco. The Piano and its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department and Provost of Culture of the Federal University of Goiás, Universidade del Atlántico na Colômbia, and Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária, and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Seba, and Yamira Rodrigues Nunes are part of the program's team. Our proposal is to bring to all of those interested issues related to the importance of music and its role in society. Thanks so much to all of you for the audience. See you next week. Thank you very much.